She just wanted the leftovers from a plate. He didn't know that simple request would change everything. In the upscale district of South Beach, a sophisticated neighborhood in Miami, where mirrored buildings and imported cars compete for space with century-old palm trees and bustling boardwalks, Michael Reynolds dined alone at the most expensive restaurant in the city. Dressed with elegant discretion, the businessman stared fixedly at the plate before him, a grilled fish with artisanal root puree that remained untouched. His gaze, though directed at the food, seemed to penetrate through the table, lost somewhere between numbers, profits, achievements, and an emptiness that only he could perceive. The ocean breeze entered through the open windows of the establishment, mixing with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of silver cutlery. Michael heard none of this. In his mind, only the numbers from the last shareholders' meeting echoed, the targets for the next quarter, the strategies for international expansion. At 38, he had conquered everything the business world could offer, but that solitary dinner was the perfect portrait of his personal life. He took a sip of wine, an expensive and exclusive red, while distractedly observing the movement around him. Couples sharing moments of intimacy, families celebrating birthdays, groups of friends laughing loudly. All those connections seemed to belong to a parallel universe to which he had no access. The waiter approached, politely concerned. "Mr. Reynolds, is everything all right with your meal? Can I bring you something else?" Michael returned abruptly from his thoughts, forcing a cordial smile. "No, everything is perfect, Lucas. I'm just contemplative today." The waiter nodded with the trained discretion of someone who had served Miami's elite for years. He knew the businessman well, a frequent customer who always dined alone, worked during meals, and left generous tips. "I understand, sir. More wine, please." As the waiter walked away, Michael returned to his almost meditative state. His technology company, Reynolds Tech, had become a national reference in innovative solutions for the financial market. He had appeared on the cover of Entrepreneurs magazine 3 times in the last 2 years. His latest financial management app had received international investments and was about to be launched in the European market. Success, money, recognition, all achieved with an impeccable methodology, avoiding distractions, cutting personal relationships that didn't add professional value, optimizing every minute of the day. Michael had transformed his life into an efficiency project where there was no room for improvisation, for chance, for feeling. Outside the restaurant, reality was different. On the wide sidewalk of South Beach, tourists hurried past, local. Residents walked their pedigree dogs, couples admired the sunset, and hidden between 2 royal palms that adorned the entrance of the establishment, a small figure attentively observed the movement. Emma, with her almost 7 years and large, curious eyes, studied the restaurant's outdoor tables. Her curly hair was tied in an improvised bun, her bare feet marked by the roughness of the streets, the dress that had once been pink, now faded by time and use. Her stomach ached with hunger, a sensation already too familiar. The girl knew the routine of that place. She knew that eventually some customer would leave food remains on plates outside. She also knew she needed to be quick and discreet. The security guards didn't tolerate her presence, but she had learned to be almost invisible when necessary. That night, however, something different caught her attention. Through the side window, she could see a man sitting alone, with a full plate in front of him untouched. This aroused in her not only physical hunger, but also genuine curiosity. How could someone have food available and simply not eat it? The restaurant's security guard noticed her presence and walked toward her with heavy steps. "Here again, I already told you that you can't ask for food from the customers. Go away before I call the police." Emma backed away, hiding in the shadows of the sidewalk, but she didn't leave. She continued to observe, patient as a small predator waiting for the right moment. She saw when the man at the back table got up to answer a call, moving away a bit. She saw when the waiter was called to another table. And she saw her opportunity. With the agility that only street children possess, Emma slid between the outdoor tables, discreetly entered through the side door, and in seconds was beside Michael's table, who had just returned from the phone call. Their gazes met in a shock of distinct realities. "Dad, can I eat your leftovers?" The words came out almost as a whisper, laden with disguised desperation and fragile hope. Time seemed to freeze. Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Not by the unexpected presence of the child, not by the request itself, but by that word, Dad, a title that no one had ever given him, a function he had never considered for himself. The environment around reacted instantly. The maitre d' approached with hurried steps, already extending his hand, to remove the girl. Customers at nearby tables observed the scene with a mixture of astonishment and disapproval. Michael, still stunned, raised his hand in a gesture that surprised even himself. "Everything's fine," he said, with a calm authority that made the maitre d' hesitate. "She will stay." "But Mr. Reynolds, she is just a—" "She will stay," repeated Michael firmly. "And bring a new plate, please, the same as mine." Emma remained motionless, unable to believe what was happening. She expected, at most, to grab some leftovers before being expelled. She never imagined she would be invited to sit at the table. "What's your name?" asked Michael, indicating the chair across from him. "Emma," she replied hesitantly, still expecting this to be some kind of trick. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing the sound of that name. "I'm Michael. Please, sit down." Cautiously, the girl sat in the chair, her bare feet dangling without reaching the floor. Her eyes never left Michael's face, studying every expression, looking for signs that the situation might change at any moment. The waiter returned with a plate identical to Michael's, placing it carefully in front of the girl. The aroma of the grilled fish made her stomach audibly growl, drawing a small embarrassed smile from her dry lips. "You can eat," encouraged Michael, observing with fascination the transformation in the child's face. Emma needed no further encouragement. She began to eat with a combination of rush and reverence, as if each forkful was simultaneously urgent and too precious to be wasted. Michael noticed that she tried to use the utensils correctly, imitating the gestures she saw around her, but her hunger spoke louder than any etiquette. "Slowly," he advised gently. "No one will take your plate." She nodded but didn't slow down much. Her eyes occasionally rose to verify if the promise was still valid, if that stranger was still allowing her presence. Michael picked up his own fork and, for the first time that night, began to eat. Suddenly, the food had a different, more intense flavor. It was as if the presence of that child had awakened something dormant within him, something he didn't know existed. "Where do you live, Emma?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. She swallowed a piece of fish before answering. "In different places," she said simply. "Depends on the day." The answer, so direct and raw, hit Michael with unexpected force. This girl didn't have a fixed home. She slept where she could, ate what she found. Meanwhile, he had a penthouse apartment with 3 suites, all impeccably decorated and rarely used. "And your parents?" The question escaped before he could consider its impact. Emma lowered her eyes to the plate, suddenly interested in moving a piece of puree with her fork. "I don't know," she murmured. "Never knew my dad. My mom—" She paused as if searching for the right words. "My mom left, a long time ago." Michael felt something break inside him, a crack in a wall carefully built over the years, a fissure in his perfect emotional armor. "Do you have anyone who takes care of you?" Emma shrugged, a gesture too adult for her age. "Sometimes the lady at the churro stand lets me sleep there, and there's Mr. John from the parking lot who gives me food when there's extra. I manage." "You manage," repeated Michael almost to himself, while something inside him stirred uncomfortably. The dinner proceeded in a silence occasionally broken by simple questions. Michael discovered that Emma was almost 8 years old, that she liked to draw on sidewalks with chalk she found, that she could count to 100, and that her dream was to have a bed of her own with princess sheets. When dinner ended, Michael found himself at a crossroads he had never foreseen in his meticulous life plans. Emma had eaten to the last grain of rice, cleaned the plate with a piece of bread, and now was watching him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. What to do with her now? Simply say goodbye, give her some money, and head to his empty apartment while she returned to the streets? "Thank you for dinner, mister," said Emma, already preparing to get down from the chair. "It was the best in my life." The simplicity of those words hit Michael with the force of a revelation. The best dinner of her life had been a simple grilled fish that he had barely valued, that he had almost left untouched while thinking about spreadsheets and performance graphs. "Wait," he said, surprising himself. "Do you have somewhere to go?" "Tonight?" Emma hesitated, her large eyes blinking rapidly as she seemed to assess which answer would be more advantageous at that moment. "Yes, I do," she finally answered, but her fragile voice betrayed the lie. Michael took a deep breath, making a decision that contradicted all the principles of rationality and planning that governed his life. "Emma, I have a big apartment with several empty rooms. If you want, you can stay there tonight. Tomorrow we can think about what to do." The girl's face lit up for an instant, but soon suspicion returned to dominate her features. "Why?" she asked, with the frankness that only children possess. "What do you want in return?" The question, so direct and at the same time so loaded with dark meanings, made Michael swallow hard. What kind of experiences had this child already had to ask such a question? "Nothing," he replied, feeling the need to be equally direct. "I don't want anything in return. It just doesn't seem right to let a child sleep on the street when I have plenty of space." Emma studied him for long seconds, as if she could see, beyond his words, as if her childish eyes had the power to unveil hidden intentions. "Okay," she finally agreed, "but just for one night." The journey to Michael's apartment was silent. In the back seat of the luxury car, Emma kept her body rigid, her hands gripping the edge of the seat, as if she were ready to jump at the slightest sign of danger. Her eyes absorbed every detail: the leather seats, the buttons on the panel, the discreet perfume that permeated the environment. "I've never ridden in a car like this," she commented when they stopped at a traffic light. "Is it really yours, or is it borrowed?" Michael couldn't contain a smile at the question. "It's mine," he answered, observing her through the rearview mirror. "It must cost a lot of money," reflected Emma, running her hand over the leather of the seat. "You could buy a lot of food with the money from this car, right?" The observation, so simple and at the same time so profound, hit Michael like an unexpected blow. It was true. The value of that automobile could feed dozens of children like Emma for years. The realization bothered him more than he would like to admit. When they finally arrived at the Atlantic Overlook building, one of the most exclusive on the South Beach coastline, Emma looked up, trying to see the top of the building. "You live in there?" she asked, wide-eyed. "It looks like those buildings in movies." "I live on the top floor," explained Michael, feeling strangely uncomfortable with his own privilege in the face of the girl's amazed look. The night doorman, Jerome, couldn't hide his surprise at seeing Michael returning accompanied by a visibly street child. His eyes widened for an instant before professionalism took control again. "Good evening, Mr. Reynolds," he greeted, opening the tempered glass door. "Good evening, Jerome. This is Emma. She is my guest." Emma waved timidly, aware of the looks that her dirty dress and bare feet attracted. In the panoramic elevator, the girl stuck her face to the glass, observing the city lights spreading below them. "It's like flying," she whispered, amazed. When they reached the penthouse, Michael saw his apartment with new eyes. The spacious living room with a view of the ocean, decorated in tones of grey and blue, with designer furniture and abstract art on the walls, suddenly seemed cold and impersonal. There were no family photos, personal objects, or any indication that that space was a home, not just a perfect architectural setting. Emma entered cautiously, as if fearing to break something just with her presence. Her dirty feet left small marks on the white marble floor, something that would normally have bothered Michael, but now seemed completely irrelevant. "Is this where you live?" she asked, her voice almost a reverent whisper. "Yes," replied Michael, observing the space through her eyes. "What do you think?" Emma took a few hesitant steps, lightly touching the surface of the glass coffee table. "It looks like those places you see on TV at the electronics store," she commented with sincerity. "It's beautiful, but can you actually live here?" The question, seemingly simple, hit Michael with unexpected force. Could one live here? He spent so little time in that apartment that he had almost never reflected on this. It was more of a trophy, a material achievement than really a home. "Let's prepare a bath for you," he said, diverting from the subject, "and find something for you to wear." The bathroom in the master suite, with its whirlpool tub and rainfall shower, provoked an exclamation of surprise from Emma. "It's bigger than the entire park bathroom," she exclaimed, running her fingers along the edge of the tub. "And this bathtub looks like a small pool." Michael opened the faucets, adjusting the water temperature while Emma watched fascinated. "You can use my shampoo and soap. I'll look for something for you to wear." While the girl bathed, Michael searched his closets for something that could serve as sleepwear for her. He found a basic white t-shirt that, on Emma, would look like a dress. He also set aside a new toothbrush, so that he kept for occasional guests, something rare in his regulated life. When Emma emerged from the bathroom, she looked like a different child. Her curly hair, now clean, revealed a natural reddish-brown tone. Her skin, free from the dirt of the streets, showed itself to be delicate and golden from the sun. Wearing Michael's t-shirt, which reached her knees, she seemed even smaller and more vulnerable. "I smell good," she announced with a shy smile, extending her arm for Michael to confirm. He leaned over and pretended to carefully inspect, making a gesture of approval that drew a laugh from her, the first genuinely joyful sound that Michael had heard from the child. "Highly approved," he confirmed. "Now let's see where you'll sleep." He took her to the guest room, an impeccably decorated environment in tones of beige and gold, with a queen-size bed and a side view of the ocean. "This will be your bed tonight," announced Michael, pulling back the silk comforter. Emma approached hesitantly, running her hand over the soft fabric of the sheets. "It really is like a princess," she murmured, almost to herself. "Can I really sleep here?" "Of course you can." The girl climbed onto the bed carefully, as if fearing to break it, and sank among the soft pillows. "I've never slept in a bed like this," she confessed, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Thank you, Mr. Michael." Something in Michael's chest tightened. Mr. Michael. It was the first time anyone had called him that, with that simplicity and genuine gratitude. "You're welcome, Emma. Sleep well." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Will you be here when I wake up?" The question, laden with a barely disguised fear of abandonment, made Michael stop at the door. "I'll be here," he promised. "Good night." "Good night, Mr. Michael." When he closed the bedroom door, Michael remained in the hallway for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened in his so meticulously planned life. In a single night, he had taken a street child home. What would he do with her in the morning? What would be the next step? Where would he take her? And why, despite all these unknowns, did he feel strangely at peace with his impulsive decision? In Taum, the solitude of his own room, Michael couldn't sleep. He kept mentally reviewing the available options. He could call Child Protective Services in the morning, or perhaps some shelter for children. But something inside him resisted these ideas. The image of Emma sleeping in a princess bed for the first time in her life wouldn't leave his mind. Around 3 in the morning, a subtle noise alerted him. He got up and went to check. Emma was in the kitchen, storing a piece of bread inside the t-shirt she was wearing. "What are you doing, Emma?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her. She turned quickly, her eyes wide like those of a cornered animal. "Sorry," she murmured, already preparing for a reprimand. "I was just saving it for later." Michael felt something break inside him. This child, even after a complete dinner, even being in an apartment full of food, still felt the need to store provisions for the uncertain future. "Emma," he said, approaching, slowly and crouching to be at her height. "You don't need to hide food. If you're hungry, you can take whatever you want in the kitchen. This house has enough food for both of us." Her eyes filled with tears. "But what about when I have to leave?" Michael didn't have a ready answer for that question. For the first time in years, he was facing a situation for which there was no strategic plan. "We'll think about that tomorrow," he finally replied. "For now, how about a glass of warm milk?" Emma nodded, still suspicious, but allowed Michael to prepare the milk and guide her back to the bedroom. When he tucked her in again, he noticed that she was still holding the piece of bread against her chest. "You can leave that on the bedside table if you want," he suggested, indicating the nightstand. "It will be there if you need it during the night." Emma hesitated for a moment, but finally placed the bread on the furniture without taking her eyes off him. "Promise you won't throw it away when I'm asleep." "I promise," said Michael, feeling a lump in his throat. As he watched Emma fall asleep again, Michael made a decision that would forever change the course of his life. He didn't know exactly how he would do it, but he knew he couldn't simply return that child to the streets or hand her over to a system that had already failed her before. For the first time in years, Michael Reynolds, the calculating and rational businessman, would make a decision based purely on emotion, and strangely that didn't frighten him. On the contrary, it brought a sense of purpose that he hadn't experienced for a long time. Morning arrived with the characteristic luminosity of Miami, that golden light that invades oceanfront apartments and transforms any environment into an impressionist painting. Michael, accustomed to waking up even before the alarm, was surprised to find that it was already past 8. He couldn't remember the last time he had slept beyond 6 in the morning. With cautious steps, he headed to the guest room to check on Emma. The bed was empty, the sheets carefully arranged. For an instant, an irrational panic took hold of him. Had the girl fled during the night? But soon a noise coming from the living room caught his attention. Emma was sitting on the floor of the balcony, diligently drawing on a sheet of paper she had found on Michael's desk. She was using the same pens he used to sign million-dollar contracts, but in her small hands, they became instruments of childish art. "Good morning," said Michael, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. Emma raised her face, her curly hair forming a wild halo around her delicate features. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," she replied with a formality that contrasted with her age. "Sorry for taking your pens without asking. It's just that I woke up and didn't want to make noise." "No problem," he assured, sitting in the nearby armchair. "What are you drawing?" She turned the paper toward him. It was a simple drawing made with the limited technique of a child, but surprisingly expressive. It showed 2 figures holding hands, one large and one small, in front of a tall building. "It's us," she explained, pointing to the figures, "and this is your building." Michael felt something strange in his throat, as if a knot was forming. "There." That drawing, so simple and at the same time so full of meaning, evoked emotions in him that he wasn't used to dealing with. "It's very beautiful," he finally managed to say. "Do you like to draw?" Emma nodded energetically. "It's what I like to do most. Sometimes the lady at the churro stand would give me old papers to draw on." Michael stood up, trying to disguise the emotion that was overcoming him. "Let's have breakfast. Afterwards, we have some things to sort out." In the immaculate kitchen, with state-of-the-art appliances rarely used, Michael prepared a breakfast like he had never done before. Normally, he would just have an espresso before leaving for the office, sometimes complemented with a fruit. Today, however, he opened the refrigerator and began to take out eggs, milk, fruits, bread. He was surprised to realize that, despite living alone, his refrigerator was always stocked, thanks to the automatic delivery service he had contracted. "Do you like pancakes?" he asked Emma, who was watching him with curiosity from the high stool by the counter. "Never had them," she admitted. "Are they good?" "Let's find out together," replied Michael, quickly consulting a recipe on his phone. The kitchen, which had always been just a functional space in his apartment, suddenly came to life. The aroma of butter melting in the pan, the sound of the batter sizzling as it was poured, Emma's fascinated expression following every movement. All this created an atmosphere that Michael hadn't experienced since when? He couldn't even remember. When they finally sat at the table with a stack of golden pancakes covered with honey and strawberries, Michael observed with satisfaction Emma's amazed look. "Is all this for us to eat?" she asked, incredulous. "Yes, but you don't have to eat it all if you don't want to," he assured, serving her a pancake. Emma took the first bite and her eyes widened. "It's the most delicious thing I've ever eaten in my life," she exclaimed, attacking the rest of the pancake with enthusiasm. Michael smiled, feeling a type of satisfaction that no professional achievement had ever provided. It was simple, basic even. He had fed a hungry child, and that somehow seemed more significant than any deal he had ever closed. "Emma," he began, carefully choosing his words as the girl savored her second pancake. "We need to talk about what happens now." She stopped chewing, her eyes immediately losing some of their sparkle. Michael realized that she was already expecting this, the moment when she would be sent away. "I know," she said, lowering her fork. "I'll go after breakfast." "That's not it," Michael hastened. "I don't want you to go away, but we need to regularize your situation. Do you understand what that means?" Emma frowned, confused. "It means I can't simply keep a child in my apartment without the authorities knowing. There are laws to protect children, and we need to follow these laws." "Will they take me to a shelter?" she asked, her voice so low that Michael could barely hear. "Have you been in one before?" Emma nodded, her eyes suddenly distant. "I stayed there when my mom left, but I ran away. I didn't like it there. The big kids hit the little ones, and the ladies were angry all the time." Michael took a deep breath. He knew the foster care system had its flaws, but hearing it directly from Emma made the reality even harsher. "I don't want you to go to a shelter," he finally said. "I want to try a different solution, but for that we need to talk to some people. Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds as Emma studied him with those eyes that seemed much older than her 7 years. "I trust you," she finally answered, surprising both Michael and herself. After breakfast, Michael made some calls. The first was to Rachel Morgan, his personal lawyer, specialized in family law. He explained the situation succinctly, asking her to come to his apartment urgently. The second call was to Dr. Laura Fisher, a renowned pediatrician who cared for his partner's children. "We're going to buy some clothes for you," he announced after hanging up the phone. "You can't stay just with this t-shirt." Emma, who was attentively observing every movement of Michael, widened her eyes. "New clothes? For me?" "Of course," he replied, trying to sound casual. "You'll need some changes of clothes, pajamas, shoes." "I've never had new shoes," confessed Emma, looking at her own bare feet. "I only used ones that people gave away, but they were always too big." Once again, Michael felt that tightness in his chest. How was it possible that something as basic as a pair of new shoes was a luxury for a child? An hour later, they were at the Miami Galleria, the largest and most luxurious shopping center in the city. Emma firmly gripped Michael's hand, intimidated by the grandeur of the place, by the gleaming stores and the well-dressed people circulating around. "It's so big," she whispered as they went up the escalator. "It seems like it never ends." Michael guided her to a children's clothing store, where a saleswoman received them with a professional smile that faltered slightly upon noticing the contrast between the elegant businessman and the visibly out-of-place girl. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "We need a complete wardrobe for Emma," explained Michael. "Clothes for all occasions, shoes, pajamas, everything." The saleswoman, quickly recovering from the initial surprise, assumed an enthusiastic air. "Of course. We have beautiful collections. For girls. Shall we start with casual dresses? How about trying on some models?" Emma, paralyzed by the situation, looked at Michael for guidance. "It's all right," he assured. "You can choose whatever you want." The next 2 hours were a revelation for Michael. Observing Emma trying on clothes, her amazed expression with each new dress, the reverent care with which she touched the fabrics, the genuine joy when she found something she really liked, all this awakened in him a tenderness he didn't know he was capable of feeling. "Look, Mr. Michael," she exclaimed, twirling in a turquoise blue dress that perfectly matched her skin tone. "It looks like a mermaid dress." "It looks beautiful on you," agreed Michael, genuinely enchanted by the transformation. When they finally left the store, they carried so many bags that they needed the help of Michael's driver, who was waiting in the parking lot. Emma, now dressed in a new outfit of jean shorts, a yellow t-shirt and white sneakers, walked as if she was stepping on clouds. "Thank you, Mr. Michael," she said as they returned to the car. "I've never received so many things in my life." You don't need to thank me, Emma. They're just basic things that every child should have. Back at the apartment, they found Rachel already waiting. The lawyer, a woman in her early 40s with short hair and red-framed glasses, observed Emma with professional and warm interest. "This is the girl you told me about," she stated, extending her hand to Emma. "Pleased to meet you, Emma. I'm Rachel." Emma shook the offered hand shyly. "Nice to meet you, Miss Rachel." Michael explained the situation in detail. While Emma explored her new clothes in the bedroom, Rachel listened attentively, making occasional notes on her tablet. "What exactly do you intend, Michael?" she finally asked. "Do you want to be her legal guardian, or are you thinking of something more permanent like adoption?" The question caught Michael by surprise. He hadn't thought that far. He only knew he didn't want to return Emma to the streets or to a system that had already failed her. "For now, I want to ensure she is safe and well cared for," he responded cautiously. "What are my options?" Rachel adjusted her glasses, entering professional mode. "Well, the situation is complex. First, we need to locate the biological mother, or at least document attempts to locate her. We also need to officially register Emma with Child Protective Services as a child in a vulnerable situation. Then we can request temporary guardianship while the legal process continues. And what are the chances of getting this temporary guardianship? Honestly, for a single man with no previous experience with children, who simply found a girl on the street and took her home, I won't lie, Michael, there will be questions. Many questions." Michael felt a knot in his stomach. He hadn't considered that. His intentions, however pure they might be, could be viewed with suspicion. "But," continued Rachel, "you have points in your favor. Your reputation is impeccable, your financial situation is stable, and you can provide excellent material conditions for the child. Besides, I can argue that you have already established a bond with her. What do we need to do first? Take her to a doctor for a complete evaluation. Document her current state of health. Then register the case with Child Protective Services. I'll prepare a petition for temporary guardianship, which we'll present to the family court. And, Michael, yes, you need to be sure about this. A child is not a project that you can abandon if it doesn't work out. It's a lifetime commitment." Michael looked at the hallway that led to the bedroom where Emma was. He thought of the girl who stored bread so she wouldn't go hungry, who had never had new shoes, who drew two figures holding hands in front of a building. "I'm sure," he replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his own voice. That afternoon, Dr. Laura arrived to examine Emma. The doctor, with her characteristic gentleness, quickly gained the girl's trust. The examination revealed what Michael already suspected. Emma was underweight, had nutritional deficiencies, and needed urgent dental care. "She's a healthy child, considering the circumstances," explained the doctor afterwards, while Emma was drawing in the living room. "But she'll need nutritional monitoring, updated vaccines, and dental treatment. I'll prepare a detailed report for the process." At the end of that long day, when they finally sat down to dinner, Michael realized that his life had completely changed in less than 24 hours. His meticulously organized schedule had been completely abandoned. He hadn't attended any meetings, hadn't responded to important emails, hadn't made any business calls, and surprisingly, none of that seemed to matter. "Mr. Michael," called Emma while eating the pasta he had prepared following another recipe from his phone. "Will I be able to stay with you?" Michael looked at her, at that small person who had entered his life so unexpectedly and had already transformed everything. "I'm doing everything possible for that to happen, Emma. But there will be people who will want to make sure that staying with me is the best for you. And if they decide it's not?" The question, so direct and at the same time so laden with fear, made Michael swallow hard. "Then we'll fight to show they're wrong," he replied, surprising himself with his own determination. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes in Michael's life. The businessman, who previously dedicated 16 hours daily to work, now divided his time between executive meetings and visits to Child Protective Services, between market analyses and looking for suitable schools for Emma. The apartment, previously a showroom of contemporary design, now displayed colorful drawings fixed to the refrigerator with fruit-shaped magnets, children's sneakers in the hallway, and a growing collection of illustrated books on the shelf that previously housed only biographies of great entrepreneurs and management manuals. The first major change came with the hiring of Mrs. Garcia, a 60-year-old lady with experience in caring for children, to help during the period when Michael needed to be at the office. At first, Emma showed extreme wariness with the presence of the new employee. "Will you leave me with her and never come back?" she asked Michael on the morning Mrs. Garcia started, her large eyes fixed on his, looking for signs of imminent abandonment. "Of course not," assured Michael, crouching to be at the girl's height. "I'll go to work and come back in the late afternoon, as always. Mrs. Garcia will stay with you only while I'm gone." Emma studied his face for long seconds, using that ability children have to detect lies with almost supernatural precision. "Promise?" "I promise," replied Michael, extending his pinky finger to seal the oath solemnly. Gradually, Mrs. Garcia won Emma's trust with her unwavering patience and her seemingly infinite repertoire of stories about her childhood in rural Texas. The housekeeper also brought to the apartment something that was desperately lacking: practical knowledge about how to raise a child. "Boy, this girl can't keep eating only those fancy restaurant dishes that you order," declared Mrs. Garcia on the third day, with her hands on her hips. "Children need real food: beans, rice, ground beef, vegetables. I'll go shopping tomorrow and prepare proper meals." Michael, accustomed to giving orders and not receiving them, was surprised to find that he didn't mind the role reversal. In fact, he felt grateful for the guidance. He had executed multi-million-dollar company mergers with more ease than he organized a healthy children's routine. In his office, reactions to his new situation were varied. Marcus Anderson, his majority partner, showed concern during a private meeting. "Michael, I understand that you're going through a philanthropic phase," he commented, carefully choosing his words. "But our investors are concerned. You've cancelled 3 important meetings in the last 2 weeks. The presentation for the Japanese was postponed, and the contract with the Mendez Group is stalled." Michael sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. It was true. For the first time in his career, work was not his absolute priority. "I'm reorganizing my schedule, Marcus. I've hired 2 more analysts to take on part of my operational workload. Soon everything will be normalized." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Michael, we've been friends for years, so I'll be direct. There are rumors. People saying that you bought a street child to improve your public image before the launch in Europe. Others speculating about your true motives for taking a girl home." Michael felt his blood boil. He stood up abruptly, his fists clenched. "Who's saying that?" "Calm down," asked Marcus, raising his hands in an appeasing gesture. "I'm just alerting you. You're a public figure now. Your actions generate reactions, interpretations. Not always fair. You need to be prepared." That night, upon returning home, Michael was greeted by an animated Emma, eager to show a new drawing. This time, there were 3 figures: her, Michael, and Mrs. Garcia, all smiling in front of a building that now had more details, including small windows and a pool beside it. "It's us," she explained unnecessarily. "A family." The word hit Michael with force. Family. Was that what they were becoming? Him, a girl found by chance in a restaurant, and a housekeeper hired less than a month ago? "It's very beautiful, Emma," he praised, hanging the drawing on the refrigerator along with the others. "Mr. Michael," called Emma while he prepared a juice for her. "When will they decide if I can stay here forever?" The question, so direct, caught him off guard. How to explain to a 7-year-old child the complexity of the American adoption system? "It will still take a while, Emma. The judges and counselors need to be sure that you will be well cared for with me." "But I'm already well cared for," she argued, the childish logic perfectly reasonable. "I have food, clothes, school, and you and Mrs. Garcia take care of me. What else do they want?" Michael smiled sadly. If only it were that simple. "They need to follow rules, Emma, rules that exist to protect children." "Silly rules," she murmured, accepting the glass of juice. If they send me away, I'll run away and come back here." The determination in her voice was so firm that Michael didn't doubt for a second that she would be capable of doing exactly that. The following week came, the first major obstacle. During a follow-up visit, the social worker assigned to the case, Deborah Sanders, arrived at a particularly chaotic moment. Emma was having a crying crisis because she didn't want to take a bath. Michael was trying to negotiate patiently, while Mrs. Garcia prepared dinner in the kitchen. "Is everything okay?" asked Deborah, observing the scene with an analytical look. "Yes," replied Michael, trying to maintain his composure. "Emma is a bit tired today." "I'm not tired," shouted the girl, contradicting him immediately. "I don't want to take a bath." "I don't want to." The social worker made notes on her clipboard, her face impassive. After an hour of observations and questions, she called Michael for a private conversation on the balcony. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm concerned," she began directly. "Emma demonstrates behaviors typical of children with reactive attachment disorder, common in situations of early abandonment. She needs specialized psychological monitoring, something I didn't see mentioned in your care plan." Michael felt a chill down his spine. He had hired doctors, nutritionists, private tutors, but hadn't considered a psychologist. How hadn't he thought of that? "I'll arrange it immediately," he assured. "Can you recommend professionals?" "Yes, I'll send a list. But there's another issue, Mr. Reynolds. Your inexperience with children is evident. Emma is testing boundaries as any child would do, and I didn't see clear strategies on your part to deal with this." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. It was true. Despite all his effort, there were moments when he simply didn't know how to act. When Emma had crying crises, when she woke up in the middle of the night screaming from nightmares, when she refused to eat something or to follow basic routines, in all these situations, he felt completely lost. "I'm learning," he admitted, his voice lower than intended. "I'm doing the best I can." Deborah slightly softened her expression. "I don't doubt that, Mr. Reynolds, but the child's well-being is our priority. I strongly suggest that you participate in a support group for adoptive parents. There's one that meets on Wednesdays at the St. Elizabeth Community Center. It would be beneficial for you." After the social worker left, Michael sat alone on the balcony, observing the city lights that were beginning to turn on. He felt inadequate, insufficient. Maybe the rumors were right. Who was he to think he could be someone's father? A workaholic, with no experience with children, with no parental models of his own to follow. His mother had passed away when he was in college, and his father had always been an absent figure. "Mr. Michael?" Emma's small voice interrupted his somber thoughts. "Are you mad at me?" He turned to find her standing at the balcony door, dressed in the unicorn pajamas they had bought together, her hair still damp from the bath she had finally agreed to. "Headache with Mrs. Garcia's help." "No, Emma, I'm not mad. Will the clipboard lady take me away?" Michael felt his heart tighten. Of course, Emma had perceived the tension of the visit. "No," he replied, extending his arms for her to approach. "She's just doing her job ensuring that you are well here." Emma climbed onto his lap, something she rarely did, and rested her head on his chest. "I am well here," she murmured, "very well." At that moment, all of Michael's doubts seemed insignificant. He would learn to be a father. He would participate in as many support groups as necessary, would read all books on child education, would hire the best psychologists. He would do anything to keep Emma safe and happy. The following Wednesday, Michael parked his imported car in front of the modest St. Elizabeth Community Center in the Oak Hills neighborhood. Feeling out of place in his Italian suit, he entered the room where about 15 adults chatted informally, seated in plastic chairs arranged in a circle. "Welcome," greeted a middle-aged woman with gray hair and a welcoming smile. "First time?" "Yes," replied Michael, uncomfortable. "Michael Reynolds. Martha Lee, group coordinator. Sit with us. We're about to begin." Reluctantly, Michael took a place in the circle. In the following minutes, he heard stories he had never imagined. A couple who had adopted twins with cerebral palsy, a retired teacher who had taken in a teenager addicted to chemical substances, a widower who was raising 3 siblings rescued from an abuse situation alone. When it came his turn to speak, Michael hesitated. What could he say to these people who faced challenges so much greater than his? "My name is Michael," he began, his voice less confident than in any corporate presentation he had ever made. "I'm trying to adopt Emma, 7 years old. I found her by chance, in a restaurant almost 2 months ago. I thought it would be simple. I have resources. I can give her everything she needs materially. But I'm realizing that's not enough. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to deal with her crises, her fears, her tests. Sometimes I think maybe she would be better with someone more prepared." A comprehensive silence followed his words. Then, the widower seated to his right placed a hand on his shoulder. "No one is born knowing how to be a father or mother, Michael, not even biological ones. We learn day by day, making many mistakes, sometimes getting it right. The important thing is not to be perfect. It's to be present and willing to learn." Those simple words, coming from a man who faced challenges much greater than his, touched Michael deeply. For the first time since Emma had entered his life, he felt that he was not alone in that journey. When he returned home that night, he found Emma and Mrs. Garcia watching a cartoon in the living room. The girl ran to hug him as soon as she saw him, a gesture that still surprised him with its spontaneity. "Look what I did at school today," she exclaimed, dragging him by the hand to the kitchen table, where a school assignment was carefully positioned. It was a simple essay, written with the irregular calligraphy of a 7-year-old child, titled "My Family." Michael read with a racing heart. "My family is new. It has me, my new dad Michael, and Mrs. Garcia, who makes the best pancakes in the world. Before I didn't have a family. Now I do. My dad works with computers and is very smart. He didn't know how to make pancakes, but learned because of me. Mrs. Garcia tells stories about when she was little in the country. We live in a very tall building near the beach. I have my own room with princess sheets. I still don't know if I'll be able to stay forever with my new family, but I pray every day for the judge to let me." The end. Michael felt his eyes burning. How many times had he cried in his adult life? He couldn't remember. Now, however, tears seemed to have a disconcerting ease in appearing. "Did you like it?" asked Emma, anxious for approval. "I liked it very much," he replied, bending down to hug her. "It's the best essay I've ever read." That night, while Emma slept in her room with princess sheets, Michael sat in the living room with a notepad, making lists. Strategies for dealing with tantrum crises, names of recommended child psychologists, books on parental education to buy, ideas for weekend activities that could strengthen his bond with Emma. For the first time in his life, Michael Reynolds wasn't planning market strategies, analyzing competitors, or projecting profits. He was learning to be a father, and somehow this seemed the most important project he had ever undertaken. The Miami summer reached its peak, with a merciless sun that transformed afternoons into exercises in heat resistance. In Michael's apartment, however, a constant breeze from the ocean ameliorated the temperature, making the balcony a pleasant refuge even in the hottest hours of the day. It was there that Emma spent much of her time, drawing, reading the children's books that now filled the shelves in the living room, or simply observing the movement of boats in the distance. 4 months had passed since the fateful night at the restaurant. 4 months of transformations, learning, challenges, and mainly mutual growth. Emma was no longer the same frightened girl who stored food in her pockets. Michael, in turn, was no longer the robotized executive who lived only for work. Both had changed, molding each other like water and rock in a constant river. The preliminary hearing in family court was scheduled for 3 days from now. Rachel, the lawyer, had prepared an impressive dossier. Medical reports attesting to the improvement in Emma's health, psychological evaluations showing her emotional progress, statements from the school about her positive adaptation, testimonies from neighbors and building employees confirming the healthy and affectionate environment. Still, Michael couldn't avoid the anxiety that gnawed at him from within. "Mr. Michael, you have that worried face again," observed Emma during breakfast, while nibbling on a toast with strawberry jam. Her eyes, always attentive, rarely let any change in the adult's mood pass by. "I'm just thinking about Friday's hearing," he admitted, trying to smile to reassure her. Is that when the judge will say, if I can stay here? It's one of the stages. Yes. Emma furrowed her brow, thoughtful, chewing slowly. If we take my drawings, it might help. Dr. Clare said my drawings show that I'm happy now. Michael smiled, genuinely touched by the childish logic. Dr. Clare was the psychologist who saw Emma twice a week, an excellent professional who had become a fundamental ally in the process. That's a great idea, he agreed, extending his hand to stroke the girl's curly hair, a gesture that had become natural between them. Let's set aside your best drawings. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Marcus, his partner, with urgent news about the company. Michael, we need you at the office now. The NVIDIA people arrived a day early for the meeting and are waiting. Only you can conduct this negotiation. Michael looked at Emma, who was now focused on meticulously arranging the fruits on her plate in a sort of smiley face. I can't, Marcus. I'm with Emma today. Mrs. Garcia asked for the day off to resolve personal matters. Michael, we're talking about a $60 million contract. Bring the girl if necessary, but you need to be here. $60 million. 6 months ago, nothing in the world would have made him hesitate in the face of this figure. Now, however, his first concern was how Emma would feel in a corporate environment full of unknown adults speaking in technical terms. We'll be there in an hour, he finally replied, after pondering the alternatives. Emma observed with curiosity. As Michael explained the situation, we'll have to go to my office today. It's a very important meeting that I can't postpone. Do you mind? To his surprise, the girl's eyes sparkled with excitement. I'll get to know where you work. Cool. Can I bring my colored pencils? Of course you can, replied Michael, relieved by the positive reaction. But it will be a long meeting and you'll need to be quiet. I know how to be quiet, assured Emma with seriousness. I learned to be invisible when I lived on the street, remember? The phrase, said with such naturalness, hit Michael as always happened when Emma mentioned her past. It was easy to forget, seeing her now so adapted to her new life, the terrible circumstances she had faced. An hour later, Michael entered the headquarters of Reynolds Tech, with Emma hand in hand. The girl wore a simple blue dress, white flats, and carried a backpack with her drawing materials. Her eyes traveled in wonder over the large lobby with its double-height ceiling, the glass walls, the well-dressed employees who moved with purpose. Wow, it's prettier than the mall here, she whispered, squeezing Michael's hand. The receptionist, Patricia, couldn't hide her surprise at seeing the CEO of the company accompanied by a child. For months, rumors had circulated about Michael Reynolds' adoptive daughter, but few in the company had actually seen the girl. Good morning, Mr. Reynolds, she greeted, professional as always, but with her eyes fixed on Emma. The NVIDIA executives are already in the main meeting room. Thank you, Patricia. This is Emma. She'll be with me today. The receptionist smiled at the child. Hello, Emma. Would you like a candy? The girl looked at Michael, seeking approval before accepting. You can take one, he permitted. In the elevator, Emma remained silent, firmly holding Michael's hand. Only when the doors closed did she raise her face to ask in a low voice. Mr. Michael, what is NVIDIA? NVIDIA. NVIDIA. It's a very large company that makes equipment for computers. We're trying to close a deal with them. Is that why you're wearing your lucky tie? Michael blinked, surprised. How do you know it's my lucky tie? Emma shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. You wear it whenever you have an important meeting. I noticed. That simple comment left him momentarily speechless. Emma had noticed a pattern that even he hadn't consciously perceived. Indeed, that navy blue tie with small silver details was the one he wore on days of crucial negotiations. It was an unconscious habit, a superstition he didn't admit even to himself. When they arrived at the meeting room, 6 executives were already waiting. Marcus stood up immediately, visibly tense. Michael, finally, gentlemen, this is Michael Reynolds, our CEO and founder. Michael greeted each of those present with the usual formality, introducing himself in fluent business terms. Then, surprising, everyone, including Marcus, he crouched beside Emma. And this is Emma, my daughter, he introduced with a naturalness he hadn't planned. It was the first time he had called her that. My daughter, without qualifiers like adoptive or explanations about the legal situation. The girl, although not understanding the business context, smiled timidly at those present, waving with her small hand. John Ramirez, the chief executive of NVIDIA, a middle-aged man with Latin features, smiled back. "Delighted to meet you, Emma," he responded, extending his hand to the child. "Your father speaks very well of you." Emma widened her eyes, first at the surprise of the stranger's friendliness, then at the content of the phrase. "You talk about me to people?" she asked Michael, genuinely surprised. "Of course I do," he replied, suddenly aware of how many times he had mentioned Emma in professional conversations in recent weeks, with a pride he had never felt when talking about business achievements. Michael accommodated Emma at a table in the corner of the room, with her drawing materials and a tablet with cartoons at low volume. The meeting began, technical and intense as expected. Negotiations of values, deadlines, exclusivities, percentages. For 3 hours, Michael conducted the discussion with his usual competence, but with a crucial difference. Every 15 or 20 minutes, his eyes sought Emma, checking if she was okay. The girl kept her promise to be quiet, focused on her drawings and occasionally watching the tablet. At a certain point, when the negotiation reached an impasse over values, Michael noticed that she had fallen asleep over her drawings, her head resting on her crossed arms. "Gentlemen, let's take a 15-minute break," he suggested, standing up. Careful not to wake her, Michael picked Emma up and took her to his private office adjacent to the meeting room. He laid her on the leather sofa and covered her with his own jacket. It was at that moment, watching her sleep peacefully, that he realized how complete his transformation was. Before, that office had been his refuge, the place where he spent more hours than in his own home. Now, looking around, he saw only a workspace, important yes, but no longer the center of his existence. The center was there in that small person who breathed softly under his jacket. When he returned to the meeting room, he found John Ramirez observing the drawings that Emma had left on the table. "Your daughter has talent," commented the executive, pointing to a particular drawing. "This one caught my attention." Michael approached to see. It was a drawing different from the usual portraits of the family. This one showed a man in a suit, clearly Michael, sitting at a large table with several other men in suits. To the E, side separated, a small girl was drawing. Above it all, in colorful letters, was written, "My dad works." "She captured the essence of our meeting well," joked John, but his look was serious when he continued, "You know, Reynolds, I have 3 children. When the oldest was your girl's age, I was so busy building my career that I missed many important moments. I would give anything to go back and balance things better." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "I'm learning that balance now," he admitted. "That's why I'm willing to accept your last proposal with one condition," continued Ramirez, surprising Michael. "Let's reduce the monthly face-to-face meetings to quarterly. Video conferences work well enough for most updates. This way, you gain more time with your daughter, and I with my family in San Francisco." When the meeting finally ended, with a signed agreement that exceeded initial expectations, Michael felt a strange mixture of professional satisfaction and personal gratitude. Emma, already awake and drawing again, raised her eyes when he approached. "Did you close the deal?" she asked, using the expression she had heard so many times in Michael's business calls. "I did," he replied, smiling, "and you were my lucky charm." On the way back home, Michael made an impulsive detour, parking in front of an ice cream shop on the South Beach boardwalk. "To celebrate the deal," he explained, when Emma looked at him, questioning. Seated at an outdoor table, with the Miami Sea stretching out before them, father and daughter savored their ice creams in a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of waves and seagulls. It was Emma who finally spoke, her small voice almost getting lost in the sea breeze. "Mr. Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course you can." "Why did you call me your daughter to those men in suits?" Michael considered the question for a moment, observing Emma's expectant face. How to explain something that he himself was still processing? "Because that's how I see you, Emma, as my daughter. The girl absorbed the answer, distractedly stirring her chocolate ice cream with the spoon. Even though the judge hasn't decided yet. Even so, some things don't need a judge to be true. They're in the heart. Emma smiled, one of those luminous smiles that seemed to light up her entire face. So, can I call you Dad? Not Mr. Michael? The question, so simple and at the same time so significant, made Michael swallow hard, fighting against the emotion that threatened to overflow. I would love for you to call me Dad. Okay, Dad, tested Emma, as if tasting the flavor of the word. On the eve of the hearing, Michael couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, imagining all possible scenarios, from best to worst. What if the judge considered that a single man, a workaholic, with no previous experience with children, was not suitable to raise a girl? What if he determined that Emma should go to a traditional family with a mother and a father? What if they discovered some biological relative who claimed custody? Around 3 in the morning, he got up and went to Emma's room, just to make sure she was okay. The girl slept peacefully, hugging the teddy bear she had received on her first trip to the mall. Michael observed her for a few minutes, amazed at how much his life had changed since that small person had entered it. Returning to the living room, he found on the table an envelope that Mrs. Garcia had left there earlier. "For you to read before the hearing," she had said, with her practical manner. Inside was a handwritten letter in a simple but careful calligraphy. "Mr. Michael, I've worked as a housekeeper for 40 years and have seen a lot in this life. I've worked in homes where parents barely looked at their children, where children were treated as nuisances, and I've worked in homes full of love, where being family went far beyond blood. What you and Emma have built in these months is rare and precious. I see how you've changed for her, how you learn every day to be a better father. I see how she flourishes with your care, how she trusts you, how she feels safe for the first time in her life. God knows what He's doing. It wasn't by chance that girl entered that restaurant right at your table. It was divine purpose. You needed each other. Tomorrow, before the judge, remember this. You are already family in what matters. The paper will just confirm what the heart already knows. I will pray for you both." Mrs. Garcia. Michael reread the letter several times, feeling a gradual calm replace the anxiety that dominated him. Mrs. Garcia, with her simple wisdom, had put into words what he felt but couldn't express. The next morning, when Emma appeared in the kitchen dressed in her best dress, her hair carefully combed by Mrs. Garcia, Michael was already ready, surprisingly calm. "Dad, do you think the judge will like me?" she asked, nervously adjusting the sash of her dress. "Impossible not to like you," replied Michael, with a certainty that came from the bottom of his heart. Together, hand in hand, they walked to the car. Whatever the outcome of that hearing, Michael knew he would fight with all his strength to keep Emma in his life, because some things, as he had told the girl, didn't need a judge to be true. They were in the heart. The Judge Robert Armstrong Courthouse in downtown Miami commanded respect with its imposing architecture. That Friday morning, Michael and Emma crossed the marble corridors towards the room where the hearing would take place, followed closely by Rachel, the lawyer, and Mrs. Garcia, who had insisted on accompanying them at this crucial moment. Emma firmly held Michael's hand, her large eyes scanning every detail of the environment, from the high ceilings to the employees in dark suits who walked hurriedly. In her other hand, she carried a colorful folder containing her best drawings, carefully selected the night before. "Is this where the judge works?" she whispered to Michael, impressed by the solemnity of the place. "Yes," he replied in a low voice. "This is where she makes important decisions. Like if I can stay with you forever." Exactly. When they finally entered the designated room, they found a smaller and more welcoming environment than imagined. The family court judge, Helen Richards, was a woman of approximately 50 years, with grey hair tied in a severe bun, but surprisingly, gentle eyes behind her discreet framed glasses. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted, indicating the places where they should sit. "We will now begin the preliminary hearing regarding the guardianship process of the minor Emma Smith, currently under the temporary guardianship of Mr. Michael Reynolds. Emma looked at Michael, confused by the name by which she had been called. "Smith, there's your last name," he explained in a whisper. "It was what appeared in the few records we found about you." The girl nodded, processing the information about this part of her identity that she didn't know. The hearing began with the formal presentation of the case by the judge, followed by the testimony of Deborah Sanders, the social worker who was monitoring the process. "During the last 4 months, I conducted regular visits to Mr. Reynolds' residence," reported Deborah, consulting her notes. "Initially, I identified some points of concern, mainly related to the inexperience of the provisional guardian with children and the specific emotional needs of the minor, who lived on the street for an undetermined time." Emma shifted in her chair, uncomfortable hearing them talk about her past. Michael gently squeezed her hand, a gesture that had become a code between them. "I'm here. However," continued the social worker, "I must emphasize the notable evolution observed. Mr. Reynolds has demonstrated exceptional commitment to Emma's well-being, completely reorganizing his professional and personal life to meet the child's needs. He actively participated in support groups for adoptive parents, hired qualified professionals for the psychological and pedagogical monitoring of the minor, and established a stable and healthy routine." Deborah adjusted her glasses before proceeding. "As for Emma, we observe a significant transformation. The child who initially presented symptoms of reactive attachment disorder and generalized distrust today demonstrates emotional security, cognitive development appropriate for her age, and, mainly, a genuine affective bond with the guardian. Her school adaptation is exemplary, with rapid recovery from educational delay." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. The same social worker who had once expressed so many doubts about his ability was now publicly praising him. Emma, noticing his surprise, gently nudged him as if to say, "See?" The judge made some notes before addressing Michael directly. "Mr. Reynolds, I would like to hear your motivations. Why do you want permanent guardianship of Emma?" Michael felt all eyes in the room turn to him. He had prepared an elaborate speech with Rachel's help, highlighting his financial resources, the stability he could offer, the professionals hired to assist in Emma's development. But looking at the girl beside him, all those planned words seemed insufficient, superficial. "Your Honor," he began, his voice more emotional than intended, "I could talk about my financial capacity or about the structure I can provide Emma, but the truth is much simpler. I want her guardianship because I love her as a daughter." Emma looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "When I found her at that restaurant 5 months ago, I was a different man. I lived for work, for material achievements, for numbers in spreadsheets. Emma taught me what really matters. She taught me to be a father, to be human again." Michael paused to control his emotion before continuing. "I know I'm not the perfect candidate for adoption. I'm single. I have no previous experience with children. I make mistakes every day. But I'm learning, and I promise to continue learning for the rest of my life. Emma deserves a family, stability, love, and I promise to give her all of this, if Your Honor will allow me." The judge nodded, her gaze softening for a moment. Then she turned to Emma. "Emma, now I would like to hear from you. I know it can be scary to speak here in front of everyone, but your opinion is very important. How do you feel living with Mr. Reynolds?" The girl straightened in her chair, her chin raised in a courageous posture that made Michael's heart swell with pride. "I feel happy," she replied with simplicity. "Uncle Michael, my dad, he takes care of me. He takes me to school and helps me with homework. When I have nightmares, he sits on my bed until I fall asleep again. He learned to braid my hair, even though it's difficult for him, and he never, ever yells at me, even when I do something wrong." Emma opened her folder of drawings, removing a particular one to show the judge. "I made this drawing for you to see how my family is now." The judge accepted the paper, analyzing it attentively. It was a colorful drawing showing 3 figures, a tall one representing Michael, a small one representing Emma, and a third one representing Mrs. Garcia. They were holding hands, with huge smiles on their faces, in front of what was clearly the building where they lived. Above, in colorful letters, was written, "My real family." "It's a very beautiful drawing, Emma," praised the judge, carefully returning it. "You really seem happy in this family." "I am," confirmed Emma, "for the first time in my life." After hearing Mrs. Garcia's testimony and some final considerations, from Rachel, the judge briefly retired to analyze all the documentation. The minutes of waiting seemed to extend indefinitely. Emma rested her head on Michael's arm, tired from the emotional tension. He stroked her hair gently, trying to convey a confidence that he didn't completely feel. When the judge returned, everyone stood respectfully. "This is a case that deserves special consideration," she began. "On one hand, we have an adoption candidate who doesn't fit the traditional profile prioritized by the system. On the other, we have abundant evidence that a genuine family bond has already been established, with extraordinarily positive results for the child in question." She adjusted her glasses before continuing. "The fundamental purpose of our legislation is to ensure the best interest of the child, and, in Emma's specific case, it seems evident that her best interest is to remain with whom she already considers, her father. Therefore, I grant the request for permanent guardianship to Michael Reynolds, with a view to full adoption after the monitoring period provided by law." Emma let out a small cry of joy, hugging Michael tightly. He, in turn, felt as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Tears that he didn't even try to contain flowed freely down his face. "However," added the judge, "I maintain the determination of bi-monthly visits by the social worker for another 6 months, as well as the continuity of Emma's psychological monitoring. Additionally, Mr. Reynolds, you shall continue participating in the support group for adoptive parents." "With all pleasure, Your Honor," replied Michael, his voice choked with emotion. "And one last thing," said the judge with a discreet smile. "Emma mentioned that she already calls you Dad. Would you like to make this official by changing her name to Emma Smith Reynolds?" Michael looked at Emma, surprised by the possibility he hadn't considered. "Would you like that, Emma, to have my last name?" The girl nodded energetically, her eyes shining. "Yes. That way everyone will know that I'm your real daughter." "Then it's decided," declared the judge. "Let it be recorded in the proceedings, the change to Emma Smith Reynolds." As they left the courthouse, the Miami sun shone intensely, reflecting in the puddles left by a passing shower, creating small rainbows on the asphalt. Emma skipped with joy, holding the hands of Michael and Mrs. Garcia, who cried, openly, without any embarrassment. "Now we're a paper family too," the girl exclaimed repeatedly, attracting smiles from passers-by. "We need to celebrate," declared Michael. "What do you want to do, Emma?" The girl stopped, thoughtful, considering all the possibilities. "I want to go to the beach," she finally decided. "You always say you're going to teach me to swim, but you're always busy." Michael exchanged a look with Rachel, who nodded understandingly. "The documents can wait until Monday," assured the lawyer. "Go celebrate this moment." Hours later, at South Beach, with the sun beginning to set on the horizon, Michael observed Emma building an elaborate sandcastle, with Mrs. Garcia patiently assisting. He had taken the day off, something unthinkable before, and completely turned off his cell phone. The business world could wait. Seated on the sand, contemplating the sea that stretched infinitely before him, Michael reflected on the strange paths of destiny. If he hadn't decided to dine alone at that specific restaurant, on that specific night, if he hadn't been so distracted that he didn't even touch his food, if Emma hadn't mustered the courage to approach his table. So many improbable coincidences that together completely changed the course of 2 lives. "Dad, come see my castle," called Emma, waving enthusiastically. Michael stood up, shaking the sand from his clothes, and walked to her. The castle was an impressive construction for a 7-year-old child, with towers, a moat, and even small flags made of sticks and leaves. "It's our family's castle," explained Emma, pointing to the different sections. "This bigger tower is you, this one beside it is Mrs. Garcia, and this small one is me, and here in front is the garden where we'll plant flowers of all colors." Michael crouched beside her, admiring the creativity and symbolism of the construction. "It's incredible. Emma, You have talent for architecture. What's architecture? They're the people who design houses, buildings, entire cities. The girl's eyes sparkled with the possibility. Can I be an architect when I grow up? And build houses for children who don't have any? You can be whatever you want, replied Michael, feeling a wave of love so intense that it almost unbalanced him. And I'll be by your side to support every step of the way. Emma smiled, that luminous smile that had become the center of Michael's universe. Hand returned to work on her castle, now adding small shells as decoration. Mrs. Garcia, perceiving that father and daughter needed a moment alone, discreetly moved away towards the coconut water vendors. Michael sat beside Emma, helping her dig the moat deeper around the castle. They worked in silence for a few minutes, just enjoying each other's company. The sound of waves breaking gently on the beach, the refreshing sea breeze in the late afternoon. "Dad," said Emma finally, without taking her eyes off her work, "did you know that I prayed to find you?" Michael stopped what he was doing, surprised by the revelation. "Prayed?" "Yes," she confirmed, still focused on smoothing the sand of one of the towers. "Every night, when I slept on the street, I asked God to send me someone who would take care of me. Someone good. I asked for so long that I almost gave up. Then that night at the restaurant when I saw you alone with that full plate, I felt that I had to talk to you, as if someone was pushing me." Michael felt a lump in his throat. "And what did you think when you first saw me?" Emma finally raised her eyes, meeting his with that disconcerting frankness that only children possess. "I thought you looked sad, even having so much food and nice clothes. Your eyes were sad. Now they're not anymore." The simplicity of that observation hit Michael deeply. It was true, he had been a sad, empty man without even realizing it. Focused on external achievements, he had forgotten to nurture what really mattered. Emma had not only been saved by him, in many ways, she had saved him too. "Do you know why my eyes aren't sad anymore?" he asked, brushing away a strand of hair. That fell over his daughter's face, and why? "Because I found you." Emma smiled, that smile capable of illuminating the entire world, and threw her arms around Michael's neck in a tight hug. For a moment, they stayed like that, embracing on the sand, the castle temporarily forgotten, just feeling the solidity of that bond that no court, no document, no law had created, only recognized. When they pulled apart, Emma had tears in her eyes, but was smiling. "Now we'll have the same last name," she said, as if she had just remembered. "Emma Smith Reynolds." "Sounds very good," agreed Michael. "But do you know what would be even better?" she asked with a sudden expression of inspiration. "What?" "If we had a house with a garden, not just an apartment, so I could plant real flowers, not just sand ones." Michael laughed, surprised by the turn of the conversation. "Really? Would you like a house with a garden?" "Yes, with a swing in the tree and space for a dog. I've always wanted to have a dog." Michael had never considered living in a house. The luxury apartment on the top floor with a view of the sea had always seemed the perfect symbol of his success. But looking now at Emma, at her enthusiasm when talking about gardens and swings and dogs, he realized that perhaps it was time to redefine what success meant in his life. "You know what?" he said, making an impulsive decision. "I think we can start looking for that house, with a very large garden for all the flowers you want to plant." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? And can we have a dog too? A dog, a cat, even a parrot if you want." "Thank you!" she shouted, throwing herself into his arms with such force that they both fell on the sand, laughing. Mrs. Garcia, returning with 3 coconut waters, found them like this, covered in sand, laughing non-stop, the castle partially destroyed. In the fall, but neither of them seeming to care. "What happened here?" she asked, amused by the scene. "We're going to have a house with a garden, Mrs. Garcia," announced Emma, still laughing, "and a dog." "Oh, really?" replied the housekeeper, raising her eyebrows at Michael. "And when did we decide that?" "Just now," he replied, getting up and helping Emma to do the same. "New decisions for our new family." As they savored the coconut water, observing the sun that was beginning to set on the horizon, tinting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Michael felt a peace he had never experienced before. There on that beach with those two people who had become his family, he finally understood what his mother had tried to tell him so many years ago. In that letter he had found in a drawer, the true meaning of life was in being responsible for someone who could not repay with anything, only with love. Emma, as if reading his thoughts, rested her head on his shoulder, sighing contentedly. "Best day of my life," she declared sleepily. "Mine too," agreed Michael, kissing the top of her head. And it was true. Among all the achievements, all the million-dollar contracts, all the magazine covers, nothing compared to this simple moment, sitting on the sand with his daughter falling asleep in his arms while the sun set on the Miami Sea. Michael Reynolds had finally found true success.